All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Thank you all very much for listening. Very much appreciate it. Any way you can interact with the product is always appreciated. Anything that helps feed the algorithm, all that good stuff. I don't want to go through the whole boilerplate today, but y'all know the drill. What do we got on the agenda this evening? Fairly short show, I think. You'll know if I'm telling the truth or not. Or if I'm accurate in that prediction. I'm not deliberately lying to you. UFC 306 or Riyadh Season Noche UFC or whatever other branding things they wanted to tack onto that. We'll be reviewing that, the good, the bad, and the otherwise, and there was a fair amount of all of it. Then some fight announcements got made over the last week. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those, but I honestly expected more of a fight announcement dump leading up to 306 or on the event, and we didn't quite get it. Um, so curious about that. We didn't get any, but we got like two, and they were on the same card. So just worth paying attention to. We might still be due another influx of news on some of those fronts. But that's what we've got. So let's go ahead and jump into it, shall we? I don't think I have too much other preamble left to get into here. In fact, I have none. So let's get to it. UFC 306. We start with the predictions, then I have some production things to talk about, and then we'll get to the fights in particular, if you'll all kind of go with me on that one. So on the prediction front, I did switch my Merab and O'Malley pick. I told you guys I was real back and forth on that one. Wound up changing my mind. What was it? A couple of things. One, I rewatched a couple of O'Malley's prior fights and realized his footwork wasn't quite what I was remembering. I'm not saying it was bad, but I remembered it differently. And that was one of the things that influenced my opinion last week. So getting some more clarity on that was a big one. Um, Honestly, I think the other thing that really kind of stood out to me. This is somewhat related to O'Malley when he fought Piotr Jan, which I still think Jan won, by the way. Um, O'Malley's defensive wrestling is very. This played out in this fight too, by the way. It's not bad. There's a slight misconception there that oh no, he can't stop a takedown. That's very inaccurate. He stopped plenty of takedowns. The problem is he doesn't have a lot of how do I phrase this? He doesn't make you pay for trying to take him down. Unless your spacing is way off base, he will just stop your takedown and then reset. He doesn't do a lot of stop the takedown, re-engage right away, or attack you as you're taking him down. It's what he does works very, very well against 80 to 90% of the division. Even some other pretty decent wrestlers he'll do very well against. But against the style that Merab brings, where it was tailor-made to beat Aljamain Sterling. This may be a better way to think about it. Aljamain Sterling is not the world's best takedown artist. He excels at getting control. He gets you to get out of position, especially trying to get you to expose the back, and then he jumps on the back. And dislodging Sterling from a control position is incredibly difficult. But his actual takedown game is not, I'm not going to say not nuanced, because that's not the right word. It's not very robust, is maybe the right way to phrase this. Um, if you stop an Aljamain Sterling takedown attempt, he kind of resets. This is true for his stuff against the fence too. If you deter one of his level changes, if you're in the clinch, it's not that he won't try again, but he doesn't chain them together in rapid succession. It's just kind of not what he does. Um, and so O'Malley being very, oh, you're trying to take me down? No. Then we're going to reset and we're going to try again. And oh, you're going to try again? No. Now you're losing energy. And by the way, every time we're at distance, I'm poking you and I'm starting to snipe you. And someone like Sterling, that style of grappling offense, very, very designed for. Someone like Marab, who is just never going to give you space. Oh, you stopped one takedown. Good for you. Here's three more. You know, that's harder. That's a that's a much more difficult thing for what O'Malley currently does. So that kind of played a role, but as I was back and forth on that one a lot. Ultimately went 6-4. Um, the only one I'm annoyed at, maybe two. I'm annoyed at myself for the co-main event because my analysis was kind of glib. I didn't do anything approximating tape study on that. I just kind of did not do a very good job on that one. So that one bothered me. I think the other one that I did not give appropriate weight to was Norma Dumont and Irene Aldana. I'm not saying I necessarily would have changed my pick, but some of what Dumont showed in this, she hadn't really showed at bantamweight yet, so I'm not too mad at myself. But in general, I'm not saying you shouldn't think well of Aldana's skills, but at this point, there's a fairly decent read on how to beat her. Or if not beat her, how to give her problems. And Dumont is not a bad fighter and is not a stupid fighter. That one I should have given more credence to. What else did I get wrong on this one? Ketlin Souza upset Yasmin Jauregui. I'm not mad at myself for getting that one wrong. And Esteban Ribovics getting the split decision over Daniel Zellhuber in one of the better fights of the year, for being honest. We'll get to that fight when we get to it. That was a split decision. Came down to the second round, and that round could have gone either way. I'm not mad about that one. So really only the co-main event, and that was the big one because I felt so dismissive the more I think about how I approached that one. Especially if I'd actually rewatched their second fight, it would have been much more informative than just my memory. So that was on me. But 6-4, not great, but I'll take it. Year to date, that brings me to 262 and 110. I'm good. 6-4 is closer than I'd like to 50-50, but there were only 10 fights. Look, if we'd had like 3 others that were prelims, or 2 others, I'm pretty sure this would have been 8-4. And some of those fights that the UFC throws together, man, they're just not that hard to call, in general. But anyway, as a minor note, the celebration of Mexican fighting spirit and fighting heritage and whatnot featured Mexican fighters going like 2-6. I think the only okay, I gotta talk for a minute about one of them, but the only ones who won were Raul Rosas Jr., who got a giant layup and still didn't look great. Got a layup of a matchmaking bit and still like nearly fumbled that one badly. But then Rodriguez had a pretty decent fight, actually. He should have lost that one. They should have stopped that fight in the first round. That's my take on it. I don't care that he came back and was able to get the win. He was out in that first round, and that needs to be respected. But they didn't, and I'll yell about that some more later, maybe. Ultimately, he was able to get the decision. But yeah, that was it. Um, you could probably give them honorary to Diego Lopez. I know he's Brazilian, but I think he lives and trains at the moment out of Guadalajara because he's the chief jiu-jitsu coach for Lobos MMA, which is the one that Alexa Grasso fights out of, and a lot of good Mexican fighters out of that one. So he's not only fluent in Spanish as well as Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese at least, but his contribution to the success of Mexican MMA, that surge it had, he's sort of been adopted by them. So you could maybe give him that one to get him to 3. But it was not a very good night in a lot of respects for if that was your rooting interest. I don't know. Do we feel like they still have kind of adopted Marab or not? I think it was only for the Cejudo fight. All right, but anyway, that was the predictions. Before we get to the fights, let me talk about some of the production of this event because this was the big thing that what are they going to do with the Sphere? Because this is a very unique venue in the world. What is the UFC going to do with this? And it turns out for the first couple of fights, very, very little. Looked like a rounder warehouse. Not very impressed with the early stuff. Just gonna be honest with you. They were kind of phoning in the first 4 fights. We didn't get our first actual background until, was it Bahamondes and Torres? I know it was up for Dumont and Aldana. So nearly at the end of the prelims was when we finally got, hey, a background. Once we got to the main card, though, I do want to give them a big thumbs up for the vast majority of this. They had set out little mini cinematic transitions between fights. We had an intro that was talking about, and each one was like a different chapter of the history of Mexico, and to a slightly different extent, depending on which period we're talking about, other portions of Central America. Mostly focused on Mexico, but you could see some of the influence from a few others, but that's a minor thing. Some of those were better than others. They started very strong. The first 3, I think. So that's the discussion of the Aztecs, and well, it's not just the Aztecs. They actually do because the indigenous peoples of Mexico aren't really the Mexicans. The Mexicans, I mean, the entire Latino group is the result of European settlers in the New World. Specifically, Spanish and Portuguese, and you could throw the Italians in there, I think. The Italians also discovered America, but yeah, the Latino group is you don't generally refer to. I don't want to get myself in trouble here, so once again, generally, Spaniards are not necessarily Latinos, because the Latino culture, because their culture's different over in the Americas. And that group came out of settlers, and they're kind of intermingling with natives. And that's kind of where that comes from. So, but you don't use that terminology a lot for European. You can call them Hispanics because Hispaniola is Spain in theory, but that's a language thing too. But it is very much a America's subculture, yeah, group. Subcultures. It's bigger than that. So they actually have to start, point being, they start a little bit with like, here's what the native people did, and then celebrating the spirit of exploration and pioneering of the people who came over and settled slash colonized. And that one was pretty good. Um, they had I think the best one was probably their one about Dia de los Muertos. Because that one was freaking beautiful. Talking about that bit of Mexican culture in particular. That was incredible. Probably the best one. They had one all about actual Mexican independence. So the War of Revolution that they fought to get away from Spanish rule. That one was pretty good. I think that might have been the last like genuinely unequivocally good one. The one for Grasso and Shevchenko's fight was that was a lot about not just Mexican cultural heritage, but that one was the one that got into fighters and some of the great Mexican boxers in particular. Uh, that one I thought was okay. The last one they did for the main event, which was like looking into the future, yeah, that one a little bit dodgy. Not my favorite of their work. But the early stuff, there was like, hey, you're because they would then like have the background set by these transitions. So we had a few that were just like, hey, fight against the pyramids, the like Aztec pyramids or whatnot. What about the Mayans? The Aztecs further south. I think the Mayans are further south. But either way, does it? You guys know what I mean. Like you would just be fighting with that as your backdrop. And then they had a couple that were, some Spanish mission style stuff, and some of those were really cool. I thought the last one was a little bit goofy looking, but in general, I think what they did was they did a really good job with the production value on this. So generally, thumbs up. A few of them in particular, they weren't all equally strong, but but the ones that were really dialed in and were really good, they were really good. That translated very well from venue to broadcast. I thought that was all really good. Having different outfits for the ring girls was a really nice touch. So some of them were again kind of like Aztec inspired costumes. Some of them were traditional Mexican. They had the big old like again Dia de los Muertos costuming and the skull face paint and everything. The last two again, the like one that was all gold looked very much like that group from the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And then the futuristic ones, okay, less good. But it was in general, it was nice. The UFC's vision of MMA has eschewed pageantry for so long. And there's a few different reasons for it. I have a couple of hunches about this. Um, One is purely monetary. It's not cheap to set up the big screens, right? And that that also leads to areas of the venue that you don't sell tickets for. If you've ever seen, so the obvious example that I'm going to talk, the obvious parallel here is like WWE, right? If you've ever seen a big WWE event, even a moderate WWE event, they used to call it the Jumbotron. I don't know what they call it now, but like they have the set. So they have the entrance stage. They have the ramp that leads down to ringside. It doesn't go straight to the ring. It actually slopes down and reaches ground level. And they got the big screen back there behind it, and there's space for pyro. And you walk backstage, and you go back through what they call the gorilla position. And the problem is everything behind that set they can't sell. So because you couldn't see anything if you bought a ticket back there, right? So whatever their configuration is, whenever you see those big sets, even just like the weekly television ones, though they've shrunk those a bit, like anything that is, 90, anything like 90 degrees on the same plane as that set and back is taped off because it would be a terrible viewing experience. So the UFC not having any kind of big setup means they can sell pretty much every seat. In theory, they can put them all up for sale. Whether they actually sell them or not, okay. But and then they because they have this because the octagon doesn't take up that much space. I mean it's fairly large, but in any given venue they can sell out a bunch of floor seats that, depending on different configurations, wouldn't necessarily be available. So part of what they're doing is it's expensive to set up and it limits ticket sales. So there's big chunks of the venue that you're not selling seating for. And I think another thing, especially because Dana White doesn't change very much. You may or may not have noticed that if you've been around for a long time. Um, MMA in general, MMA in the United States. Let me back that up just a hair. MMA in the United States, this is not as true of other locations in the world, was so fighting for credibility that any association with professional wrestling, even in presentation, was eschewed. Never mind how close MMA and pro wrestling actually are, but that's a whole other discussion I've had occasionally in the past. They didn't want to be associated with it because that's a show and a work, and MMA is a show in the sense that it is being presented, but it's a legitimate sporting contest. Sort of. The degree to which MMA is actually a sport is somewhat nebulous in my mind, but that's a slightly different argument as well. For the purposes of regulation, it is a legitimate sport. Whereas professional wrestling is theatricality and deception. And I'm not hating on either one, but those are the distinctions, and they just really, really, really couldn't be associated with the quote-unquote fake wrestling. And there was a time when I think that might have had value. We're kind of past that. But for the last 5 years more, the UFC has just been, it's always the same. You could not, occasionally you'll be able to tell what, they rely on B-roll footage that they broadcast to let you know, hey, we're wherever. There's nothing about any individual event that looks any different from any other event. They are factory-made content. And that, I'm not saying that has no strengths, but it unbearably homogenizes the product to the point where even I can't remember. I can remember a lot of stuff about MMA. I can't always remember events. I can't always remember it was UFC, what number it was, when whatever happened. I can remember that the thing happened. I can remember the fights. I can remember when the titles changed hands. I can remember who beat who. I can remember whether or not a fight was very good or not. Most of the time I watch a lot of this crap, so some of it does blur together. But I can remember a lot of it. 90% of the time, I could not tell you, if you put a gun to my head, the number event for a UFC that I'm talking about. Look, man, Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez. Giant moment in Madison Square Garden. I couldn't tell you what number that UFC event was. It's a little bit embarrassing. It really is. But in general, I struggle to remember those because what's memorable about them other than the fights? And if I can remember the fight, who cares about anything else about it? And seeing the UFC put forth effort for the first time in a long time to the presentation of the sport was really a breath of fresh air. I know not everybody loved it. And again, there's different parts of it that I liked more than others. And it did have there if they try to do something like this again, and I really hope they do. I can't tell you how much blander everything else feels, even just in memory, after something like that. Just something different. Something different. I mean, for a while it was okay, every 100 episodes or every 100 pay-per-views will change out the color of the canvas. I don't even think they actually did that for 100. Yeah, but it's just stuff like that. That's the extent of their creativity. Most of it is just, again, it's homogenized. What's that silly song from the 50s? Oh. And they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. I can't remember the title of that song for the life of me. Even how it actually, I remember the melody of how it starts, but I only remember that bit of the lyrics. I swear that's the opening. It's not the opening theme, but it's the first song they play over the first episode of Weeds. Boy, am I dating myself even with that. Good grief. Anyway, that's the feel of the UFC events in general, and seeing something where they put forth a bunch of effort. I don't need every show to be this. That might be cost prohibitive, even with as much cash as the UFC has. If they tried to do this for every show, even every pay-per-view, it might not be all that feasible. But I would love if they made this kind of thing, and it might have to be the Sphere because it's a very unique venue, but just this kind of event where you put forth effort into the presentation. Do that, 2, 3 times a year. 4 would be nice. Pick out 4 events that, okay, we're gonna we're gonna do costumes for the ring girls. We're gonna kind of theme it out maybe a little bit. We'll, do some fun stuff production-wise instead of the same old, same old, same old. So I really hope we get some more of that going forward. We probably won't, because the UFC, again, they just don't like doing this for whatever reason, but what a wonderful just breath of fresh air from the homogenized cookie cutter factory assembly line product that they've been giving us forever. So my 2 cents on all of that. Take that for whatever it's worth. All right, let's get to the fights themselves, shall we? Oh, sorry. Last note on the production. This event went long. This thing started at 5:30 my time, and it ended, what, about 7 hours later? I expect 6. I've told y'all before, that's my assumption for a UFC card broadcast start to broadcast sign off, 6 hours. Sometimes they go longer. That's definitely on the table. They only had 10 fights on this card, and they still went 7 hours. Some of that was the transitions between fights, which were a little bit longer than normal, but not horribly. Those weren't horribly longer than the average commercial break between fights on a given fight night, right? Weren't that much different. Slightly different, not that much different. I will give them a moderate pass on literally every fight on the main card going the distance. We had 2 finishes all night. That's just rough. And this isn't quite the lowest finish rate for like a modern or even like for a UFC event. but it's real close. I'd have to go back a ways to find the last one that was like, hey, we got 2 finishes. So I understand that some of that's out of their control. But man, this was a long one, and it felt long. And the main and co-main are getting some hate, and while I understand where it's coming from, it feels overblown to me. Having to follow, look, the first 3 fights on this card, on the main card, delivered. Lopez and Ortega would have been a definite fight of the night contender if it wasn't trying to follow Ribovics and Zellhuber. And even then, like Ronaldo Rodriguez and Ode Osborne was a really good fight. We had 3 really good fights in a row, and then main and co-main that were not fireworks. I think they're being unfairly demeaned. And the part of the problem is a bunch of the people in like the commentary Twitter space have so like diluted their perspectives with sarcasm and snark that it's difficult to tell when they're being genuine. And part of that is like the snark is genuine for a lot of this, but when you're then trying to be slightly sarcastic with it, it's hard to tell the difference. But ultimately, I understand neither of these 2 fights are anyone's favorite fight of the year. Right? We are not dealing with that. We're not dealing with bad fights, though. And claiming that they are bad it's a bridge too far for me. Anyway, with that out of the way, but yeah, long event, not always the UFC's fault. What are you going to do if people are just going the distance? It's not, and to be very clear, in those first 3 fights, they were trying to finish. I don't mean to imply that there were no attempts at finishing the fight from the main and co-main, but neither of those fights got very close to having a finish. Lopez and Ortega was close a couple of times. Ribovic and Zellhuber many times was close. I mean, each guy was close to a finish in the 3rd round alone. And I'm on record already saying I think they probably should have stopped the fight between Rodriguez and Osborne in the 1st round, but we'll get to all that when we get to it. So I understand that these things do happen sometimes, but long night was a long night. And it being such a long night contributes, I think, to some of the apathy and antipathy towards main and co-main. If we hadn't already been there for as long as we'd been there, might have felt different. Still not barn burners, but maybe a more sober appreciation of what happened, which hopefully I'm able to land here. All right, main event, that's enough blathering about the production. Main event, Merab Dvalishvili defeats Sean O'Malley, unanimous decision, 49-46 and 2 48-47s. I was 48-47. I gave O'Malley the 3rd and the 5th. The 5th is universally, I think, given to him. 3rd, I just thought he did the best job kind of neutralizing Merab's takedowns, and he landed, I think, the best strikes. He had a really nice flurry at the end of the 3rd. 2nd or 3rd, hang on, I want to make sure I get this right. It's one of those 2, and I'm 90% sure it's the 3rd, but I just want to make sure. Yeah, it was the 3rd. Okay, so I gave him the 3rd and the 5th. I think that's what the other 2 judges gave him. I can find out, actually. Let me, for the sake of just for the sake of my curiosity, because they occasionally will post these. Let me see if I can locate the scorecard segment. Not interested in travel deals. Hang on, is it under results? There's the official scorecards. Okay, I got there. So officially, and boy, the judges were in fact very busy. Yeah, it was 3 and 5 that both Sal D'Amato and Chris Lee gave to O'Malley. Mike Bell only gave O'Malley the 5th. The 3rd, I gave it to O'Malley, but I don't think it's out of line to have given it to Merab, for whatever that's worth. Yeah, O'Malley just... I mentioned like kind of why I changed my mind on the pick. He struggled to stop some takedowns early. A few things about O'Malley's game that I do think they're being over because he fundamentally was out wrestled. Like that's at the end of the day, he got out wrestled. There's a bit of a perception that goes along with that his takedown defense is bad and he can't stop a double leg. That's not true. A few things I do think need to be referenced here in O'Malley's favor. He was able to block a bunch of single legs once we got to like rounds 3, 4, and 5. Even did okay in the second. He wasn't full on. He was kind of like he wasn't limp legging the traditional way. Traditionally, you turn your back, push the head down. It's harder to do in wrestling because you have shoes on, but your leg goes limp, turn your back, push the head down, pull your leg free. Jose Aldo, master of the limp leg escape, right? Feed the single leg. This was his thing. Like anytime he was like, oh, you're going to wrestle me now, or we're against the fence and I don't want to be here anymore. Feed you the single leg, you drop for the single leg, instantly limp leg, push free, separate, reset. Watch him do it. He is the best. The fact that he was so competitive with Merab at this point, like when you look back on that fight, can we just talk about how much he was ahead of the game? Like the game is just now catching up to where he was years ago. And he's still out there beating younger guys. So, Aldo, that man's resume does not get enough appreciation. Just throwing it out there. But he would do almost the opposite. So instead of turning his back and limp legging, he would pull his leg up and then rotate outward from his body with his hip. So up and out instead of turning your back. Which was an interesting thing to do. I think it only really worked because he was able to kind of, when he did that, get a little bit of like framing or blocking to stop Merab's hands from coming together. But I'd have to go back and like really look at some of the details there. But he stopped a good chunk of them. In fact, let me find the stats. Alright, that's what they changed the URL to. I think I remember that at this point. Okay. Let's check this. Total stuff per round. Yeah, Merab over the whole fight was only 6 of 15. Yeah, O'Malley stuffed all 5 in the third. Part of why I think he won that round. Stopped 3 of 5 in the fifth and still won that round. He's just... It just needs to be said, the notion that his takedown defense is bad is going to be overstated as a result of this. It wasn't fine-tuned for Merab's style. That's true, and I think that's a fair criticism. But saying it's bad is going to be... that's not going to convey the truth of this. Also, his ability to get up from the bottom was fairly good. Now, that doesn't mean that, Merab didn't have control time. He had a total control time over the whole fight of 10 minutes and 3 seconds. Rounds 2 and 4 being kind of the bulk of that. That was 3 minutes and 12 seconds in the second and 3 minutes and 37 seconds in the fourth. So, not saying that was, it was immediate and just utterly, deflating to Merab, but O'Malley does do a pretty decent job of going through some of the things you're supposed to do to get up. The problem he ran into here is, and I mentioned this before, a lot of how he was approaching regaining his feet was using the fence to wall walk, which is not the end of the world. It's one of the things you do there. But against someone whose goal is to take your back, he was doing everything you should be doing. Against someone who does what Khabib did, they're fine with, oh, you got up. For someone trying to take your back, that's almost the end of it. You keep your back enough to the fence where they can't get a hook all the way around. They can't get their body all the way around. You turn into them in the clinch. And then you're able to separate, and they'll have to basically start over. Someone who does, again, what Merab does, what Khabib did, oh, you're on your knees against the fence looking to wall walk. I'm not going to try to take your back. I'm going to move to your back. I'm going to hold a waist lock. I'm going to pick at a posting limb. I'm going to, pick an ankle. I'll strip an arm out if that's what you're posting on. And I'll land some punches and I'll knee you in the leg or the body. And you're not getting up. Well, no, not you're not getting up. You're not getting away. I'm going to mat return you. I'm going to ride you. I'm going to pull you back. I'm going to trip you forward. I'm going to up and down, back, left, right, center. I'm going to sneak damage in, and you're going to have to fight like the devil to get me off of you. And I don't care one iota about establishing a really dominant control position by the traditional hierarchy. That was something he was struggling with throughout this fight. That's not the same thing as having bad wrestling or bad takedown defense. The other thing he doesn't have is, he doesn't punish you for it. If he can't full-on intercept you and he doesn't throw a lot of intercepting strikes when he's worried about the takedown, then you're just going to get away with it for free, which is kind of what Merab did. Not that O'Malley never landed on him. He landed punches, had a couple of good knees, but he was never able to get Merab to stop and rethink his strategy. He was never able to really kind of... We've seen Merab hit and hurt. Dude, Cejudo hurt him. He should have been stopped in that Marlon Moraes fight. I'll stand by that one. Who's the other one? It's not uncommon for him to... I think Jan hit him a couple of times, but they had 5 rounds, and ultimately, Merab won. How, Sean O'Malley had a very, definitive striker, a guy whose striking is very impactful, had the least success striking Merab of guys who are Cejudo, who's a wrestler first and foremost. I mean, O'Malley's output in this fight was low. He only landed 47 significant strikes. Total was only 49. That's a ridiculously low number for him. I mean, the Cheeto fight is going to throw those stats all out of whack because he hit him 200 times. But he's generally fairly active. He landed 49 total strikes. Merab landed 214. Dude, Merab is... The 2 rounds where he was able to get legitimate control time, so again, 2 and 4 are big. But if we go round by round, Merab, total strikes, 25, 65, 25, 74, 25. The minimum he landed on him, total strikes, was 25. Over 5 minutes. That's 5 total strikes every minute. And that may not seem like a whole lot until you realize you're trying to do this to a guy who's actively resisting everything you're doing. And when there's not a giant skill disparity, if there's a big skill disparity, you'll get hit 5 times in, 10 seconds. It's happened to me a couple of times. Just sparring. Oh, okay, I am not with it today. Hitting a professional fighter 25 times, so hitting them well enough to be counted 5 times every minute is not easy to do. Especially when O'Malley is also working from bottom, working to reset, working to off balance, working to stand up. He just wasn't ready for the specifics of how Merab approaches this kind of thing. He was very prepared for Aljamain Sterling when they fought and for Aljamain's style of fighting. Wasn't as ready for how Merab approaches it. And even then, it's not like he didn't have success. I thought he won the third, and he clearly won the fifth. He hurt Merab to the body late in that round with some front kicks. Caught him just breathing at the wrong time, I guess, and hurt him. Couldn't capitalize, couldn't really make a go of it, but pretending he had no success is just not accurate. It amused me when Joe Rogan after the fight was like, were you surprised they scored it as closely as they did? Like, guy, you gave up the fifth. And the third was super close. The other 3 rounds, not close. Round 1, not close. 2, very much not close. 4, very much not close. There is no argument for Sean O'Malley winning this fight at all. At all, at all, at all. But pretending that Merab should have 50-45 the guy, somebody gave O'Malley 2 rounds. Watch round 3 and watch round 5 in isolation. 1, everyone agrees O'Malley won the 5th. 2, round 3 is close. So pretending that 48-47 means the fight was super close because it's somebody won 3 rounds versus 2 is just not accurate. It's a perception thing. It's kind of stupid. This fight was not that close. But really, again, this fight not close, but because of round by round scoring, yeah, I thought O'Malley won a couple of rounds. Didn't matter because there's no possible argument for him winning 3 of the 5. This wasn't a split decision. I don't know where that kind of came from because, look, it's because Merab was so clearly the winner when it was all said and done that people go, wait, 48-47? Yeah, watch those 2 rounds again. Come back to me. Really good performance from Merab. I don't think he holds that belt very long because I think Umar Nurmagomedov is going to beat him. But we'll wait for that fight to happen. Yeah, Merab's motor, pretty much unmatched. Got some decent offense going here. Again, landed a fair number of strikes. Never really had O'Malley hurt or in too much of a submission threat. He had a decent front headlock going at one point. Kind of sitting against the fence, and there was some weirdness in this fight. Can we just be honest about a couple of things here? One, O'Malley's corner being reprimanded for excessive coaching, and somehow the UFC broadcast not knowing that that's a rule. It's written, it's in the bio, it's there, you can't do it. There's specifics. Wonderful follow on X or Twitter. Eric McGracken posted the specifics of it if you want to go find them. I don't feel like going back through my stuff there. But it's there. I mean, at a bare minimum, excessive coaching is when you don't listen to the ref when he says no coaching. Bare minimum. And there's some other relevant points, and Herb Dean kind of got on, again, the O'Malley corner for doing that. Then Merab, is holding this front headlock as O'Malley's sitting on the fence, and he kind of kisses his shoulder repeatedly, and that's weird. And then the 5th round, Herb Dean's like, hey, let's see some action. As Merab was doing, there's a few times when Merab was just circling, and to be abundantly clear about the following, Merab punted is a strong word for what he did in the 5th, but he was not fighting the fifth the same way he fought the fourth. He was very aware that, okay, I'm going to win this as long as I don't do anything really, really stupid. So he fought not to do anything really, really stupid. I don't care, but Herb Dean was very quick with telling, no, you guys, you got to engage. Now, timidity is a real thing. It's a real foul. And I have no problem with the referees being aware of that. Felt a little quick on the trigger, and especially after a couple of takedowns when Marab's on top and he's like past a half guard and Herb Dean's like, you got to work. Like, my guy, he's working. He's not just holding. There's some stuff going on there. I don't mind a referee being aware that, okay, nothing's happening. You do have to fight here. He felt a little quick on the trigger with that one in the fifth round of this. But just weird fight. Again, some weirdness. Marab's champ, good for him. Won it, earned it the hard way. Because, dude, look at who he had to beat to get here, by the way. If you look at his last few fights, it's Jose Aldo, former champion, Piotr Jan, former champion, and Henry Cejudo, former champion. None of those being all that close. The Aldo fight, he won fairly clearly, even though it was not a very definitive fight. You know, he couldn't do a whole lot. Aldo wasn't able to muster enough punishment to counter him. But he didn't take Jose Aldo down once, because Jose Aldo is freaking awesome. But then he had to beat Piotr Jan over 5 rounds. He did. And he out-wrestled Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo. In fact, heaved him up over one shoulder and slammed him across the freaking octagon. Like, that's the kind of thing that lives in your head if you're a wrestler, is getting hit like that. And then he had to beat Sean O'Malley. Look, he had to earn this one, man. And he did. So my hat's off to him in that respect. I've said before, there's nobody I'm picking to beat Umar Nurmagomedov at this point, but I'm curious to see that fight. There was a lot of reaction to this one being, oh boy, Dana's going to have a meltdown. Now we've got Merab and Bilal Muhammad as champions. And, guys, either this sport has merit or it doesn't. And I will be the... So let's get the first thing out of the way here. Both those gentlemen had to earn their title fights the hard way because their style is not exactly fan-friendly. All they could do was win. That was the only way they were going to get shots, was just beating people over and over and over and over again until they forced the issue. And they did, and Bilal was expected to lose. Merab was a slight dog when this thing closed, but he'd been the favorite all week. But then they had to go out there and they beat the champions. That is to be respected. It is what the sport should be doing. Say that first, because that's the most important part. Secondly, I understand that neither of them is... I don't call Merab boring, because calling Merab boring, one, would impose a different set of standards than I think are applicable, because what each person finds exciting is different person to person. I'm not the supreme arbiter of boredom versus excitement. I don't feel it's unfair to say that Merab's style does not exactly capture the imagination of the fans, and I have definitely said that about Bilal Muhammad, who, for a long time, I had the running gag that I just forgot he existed. It's not unfair to say that their styles are not resonating with fans. And I think they have 3 finishes in the 3 finish victories in the UFC between them. And they've had a lot of fights in the UFC. So they earned those titles. The hard way. They were given no promotional favors at all. At all. I just mentioned the murderer's row that frickin' Merab had to go through. He earned that. It's also not unfair to say that if 2 of your champions have 3 total finishes between them in their UFC careers. Boy, that's a dire stat, isn't it? So, it's not unfair to say, but I'm not going to throw Merab under a particular bus. Um, and yeah, I kind of expect Umar to beat him, but we'll see when that fight happens. As for O'Malley, let's get him and Corey Sandhagen together. They're just going to strike each other's faces off. Let's have that, right? Let's have some fun with that one. But it's going to be a hard row to hoe for O'Malley to get the title back between Merab and Umar, because Umar doesn't fight exactly like Merab. Not saying he does, but he can use that same style, and that style is a problem for Sean O'Malley right now. And getting ready to defend it is a big task. Not impossible. That's a big climb for him. But O'Malley and Sandhagen, again, yes, please. So that's what I would do with that. And yeah, Umar and Merab pretty easily the next fight. And I'm just not picking anyone to beat Umar right now. So that was your main event. It was okay. A lot of people are getting kind of really down on it. I'm not really down on it. But I'm more than willing to I understand, people not being great on it. Co-main event, getting this one wrong bothered me because I should have known better. This is the only one where I feel like I should have known better. Valentina Shevchenko beats Alexa Grasso via unanimous decision, 50-45 across the boards. No contest, no dispute, no controversy. Absolutely crystal clear winner. Shevchenko when I say she blanked Grasso, like Alexa Grasso landed 18 significant strikes all fight. Total strikes, because she threw a lot of like really small stuff from her back, her total strike count is higher. But so much of that is just, okay, I'm going to hammer fist your body while I'm on bottom, or, it's stuff like that. It doesn't matter. 18 significant strikes for Alexa Grasso is, anytime anybody gets held to, I mean, that's a shockingly small number. Her best round in terms of significant strikes landed for Alexa Grasso was 8. She never landed double-digit significant strikes in any round. Story of this fight, it got set early, and I think a couple of things about this. One, Shevchenko, their first real exchange, because Grasso does a lot of switching, but Shevchenko always fights southpaw. Grasso came in orthodox at first. Walked in on kind of a straight line. I mean, walked is a bit of an exaggeration, but entered on a straight line. And Shevchenko immediately cracked her with a left hand. Left hand right hook. I can't remember how well the right hook landed, but the left hand landed flush. When you get hit that clean, that early into a fight on your first real entry to an exchange, it kind of messes with your head a little bit. So she kind of just reset, switched to southpaw to kind of neutralize. You go closed stance against Shevchenko to neutralize her power kick because she doesn't throw it to the leg. I don't know why. She rarely throws it to the leg. I shouldn't say doesn't. She rarely will close stance, throw the power leg kick or even the power head kick. But when you're open stance, she throws it to the body all the time. So taking that away just with your stance choice. But as soon as Grasso went southpaw, she got double-legged. Harder to double-leg from open stance. Very well timed by Shevchenko. And that was kind of the story of the fight. Anytime Grasso wanted to enter an exchange, Shevchenko was good about hitting her on the way in, or even on the way in when she'd like back up and throw the check hook because her right hand was doing a fair amount of work. Anytime Grasso tried to enter, she'd get hit. anytime Grosso really overcommitted or got caught at an awkward distance switching stances, she got taken down. And there was no funny business from Shevchenko. I don't think she threw a single spinning attack all fight, and all of her takedowns were, I think only one or two may have come from the clinch, and they were not headlock throws. The things that got her in trouble in their previous fights, she finally, no. Everything here was straight-laced fundamentals. I got the bounce back check right hook, the counter two, and double leg, single leg, no judo throws, no headlocks, none of that. Just because she is the better wrestler, she's the stronger fighter between the two, physically stronger. And if she just removed the mistakes that Grasso had capitalized in their previous fights. And Grasso had no adjustment. Over and over, got taken down. Look, Shevchenko's significant strike total was not huge. It was 45, which is, don't get me wrong, not small. But she also only threw 80. Grasso, I mentioned, only landed 18. She threw 100 significant strikes. You're landing less than 20% of what you're throwing. Oy. Shevchenko's takedowns, her accuracy on the takedowns was good, 8 of 12. So 66%, had 16 minutes of control time between groundwork and on the fence. Just never let Grasso do anything of note. The closest Grasso got was in round 4. Was it 4 or 2? I think her submission attempts were she's been undersold on the submission attempts. She's only officially credited with 2, and I think that's a little bit selling her guard work short. But she got, I think it was 4 when she grabbed the guillotine on the way down. Used it to roll towards top position, then got rolled all the way through to a hip, and kind of lost the grip. But that was okay, and there was an armbar attempt in the second that was not like super tight, but had the potential to be dangerous. But other than those 2 moments, she did not have almost anything. She didn't land. And I can go through what she's credited with landing, but I don't think any of those had any real impact on Shevchenko. She struggled mightily trying to get up from underneath her, and just... Yeah, Shevchenko got at least 1 takedown every round, and never had less than 2 minutes and 20 seconds of control time. That's just is what it is. Should be Manon Fior next. Look, I'm not saying that I would hate another fight between Grasso and Shevchenko at some point, but you can't do their 4th fight. This was the first trilogy in women's MMA in UFC women's fighting history, by the way. And now they're 1-1-1. After this, there is no appetite for an immediate 4th fight. If they both win their next fights, you could maybe get back to it, but you can't go right back to it. You got Manon Fior next, and Fior and Shevchenko is not going to be the most exciting fight in the world, is my hunch, but I am interested in it. Grasso, I don't know. Rose Namajunas is floating around out there in that weight class. Who's the other one? Let me find the old rankings here. Blanchfield, Macy Barber, Natalia Silva just had that big win. There's options for her that she hasn't fought, so Blanchfield, Barber, Namajunas, those come to mind. Yeah, but a lot of people, I was not giving Shevchenko the credit I should have for this one, so mea culpa on that. Didn't give it the right read through and thought process, so on me. Shevchenko is now once again the women's flyweight champion, and Manon Fior is going to be an interesting challenge. Interesting if you're, like me, but it's probably not going to be the most exciting fight. Featherweight next. I don't need to take forever on this, geez. Okay, Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega. Lopez wins unanimous decision, 2 30-27s and a 30-26. Lopez badly hurts Ortega with a right hand left hook early in the fight. Spends a lot of time in Ortega's guard. Somebody brought up an interesting point about Ortega's guard work. He's got a good guard, but it's all upper body attacks. He doesn't really invert for legs, which means that standing over him, like certain elements of your posture, you have to be more considerate of with someone who's fast about transitioning to attacking a leg. If he doesn't do that, you have to be mindful of the triangle choke and the arm bar because he's very good at those. But if you're very good, and Diego Lopez is very good at jiu-jitsu, being prepared for those is not the end of the world. And especially if he can't get a guillotine or a front headlock attack going, he's very good at what he does, but what he does is somewhat predictable. And that's not the best place to be with your guard work in MMA if you want to fight off of your back or be dangerous there. Lopez, he clocked Ortega with a left hook in the third round as well. Really good win for Lopez. Probably going to should be in the top 5 contenders after this. I don't know what's next for him. He wants a title shot. There's still a few things up in the air. We don't know about Volkanovski's return schedule. We don't know what's going to happen with Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria. Volkanovski has said that his next fight will be for the belt in some capacity. Might be an interim belt with Lopez. He said he's not opposed to that. I don't know. There's stuff up in the air, but very close to the title picture, Diego Lopez. And depending on how a few things play out, might get the next shot. For Ortega, I think he mentioned he's wanting to look at lightweight. And given some of his weight cutting issues for featherweight in the past, I don't think that's a bad call on his part. So I don't know how much success he'll have at lightweight, but I would be curious to see him there. Your fight of the night, and again, fight of the year contender here, Esteban Ribovics defeats Daniel Zellhuber via split decision, 29-28. Zellhuber, good first round, fighting long, good kicks, long punches. Ribovics bowling forward, hits the body a little bit, trying to land some hooks. But clear round for Zellhuber. Second round, very close. Both men, we get a little bit of a dogfight. Third round is the insane one. Early in the round, Zellhuber catches Ribovics coming in with an elbow and drops him. Ribovics fights up, keeps engaging, and eventually clobbers Zellhuber with a right hand on the temple, gets him against the fence, and just unloads. Zellhuber able to move his head enough, keep moving, avoids being stopped, and if Ribovics had bothered to throw a few uppercuts in there with his hooks, he might have been able to finish this one, but for whatever reason didn't. Wild round. If I had a Round of the Year award, I don't, but if I did, this would definitely be in consideration. Ribovics, it comes down to how you scored the second, and it was a close round. It was a good round. Great fight. Fight of the night. Fairly easy call. If you haven't seen this fight, look this one up. Lopez and Ortega was pretty good too, but look this one up. This was great. And kicking off the main card, Ronaldo Rodriguez defeated O'Day Osborne via unanimous decision, a 29-28, and then two 29-27s, and I got beef with this. I don't hate giving Ribovics a 10-8 in the second. He had full mount for a long period of time, landed a barrage of elbows. It was not uncalled for. If you give Rodriguez a 10-8 second, you really should have given Osborne a 10-8 first. He floored Rodriguez with a right hand, got on top, landed punches. I thought this should have been stopped, for being candid. Looked like he went out, got caught in a really tight triangle for a long period of time. Ultimately survived, but if what Rodriguez did in the second was a 10-8, I'm not saying it isn't, what Osborne did in the first was a 10-8. Bare minimum. Rodriguez winning rounds 2 and 3 is not... I'm fine. I don't object to him winning the fight. The lack of consistency with what 29-27 for Rodriguez represents is what I have a problem with. All right, that was your main card. On the prelims, Norma Dumont defeated Irene Aldana via unanimous decision 30-27. Just fighting while backing up from Dumont. Pretty decent jab, good enough kicking game. Just anytime Aldana got close. Planted enough to land on her and then backed up and just over and over and over again. There was a cut that was opened up on Aldana's forehead from a clash of heads in the second round. Initially, not the worst cut in the world. By the end of the third round, one of the worst cuts you've seen in the UFC. It was up above her right eyebrow. It started up on the forehead and just went down past her eyebrow, like really under the brow towards the eye. It was deep. It bled that entire third round. She had a crimson mask. I don't use that term very often to describe fighting because frequently there's just blood, but it's rarely the wrestling crimson mask. This was the old crimson mask that bled all over the place. There's a lot that went into making that cut worse. She kept getting jabbed on that side of the face. At one point, she wiped her face with her shirt, and there's a non-trivial chance that she, because as she was wiping, pulled it and tore the cut wider and longer. If you're not squeamish, look up that cut. Boy, it's a doozy. Horrifying cut. A good win for Dumont. My bantamweight is such a wasteland. She might be starting to do something there. Lightweights, Ignacio Bahamondes knocked out Manuel Torres, 402 of the first. Torres did okay work early, but Bahamondes is just big and long for the weight class. Caught him with a pull counter 2. They were opposite stances, if memory serves. Torres southpaw. Throws the left hand. I forget which stance it was, but misses his own cross pretty badly. Zellhuber fades off at an angle. Right hand counter. Boom. Drops him. Connor did this punch a lot. Sean O'Malley caught... this is what Sean O'Malley hit Aljamain Sterling with. It's a classic for a reason. Torres was able to fight his way up, but not too long after that, got hit with that same punch again, and we were done. Good win for Bahamondes. He was the underdog in this one, and I wasn't sure why. But, not every underdog I pick wins, but I never pick an underdog just to pick an underdog. If I pick them, I think they have a chance to win, and I liked Bahamondes for this one. Didn't see this one coming. Ketlin Souza chokes out Yasmin Jauregui with a rear naked choke, 302 of the first. Jauregui was touted as a very high-level prospect for a while, but she is not panning out. They just got trading kind of in the pocket. Jauregui not really moving her head. Souza drops her with a left hook, grabs the rear naked choke. Done and dusted. Joshua Van defeats Edgar Chairez via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. Good fight here. Chavez has a good first round, but can't quite maintain it. The pressure from Van got to him. It's another one where I almost changed my mind on this one. Gonna be honest with you. I didn't realize that, I knew Van got knocked out in his last fight. I didn't realize how close it was to him still being on suspension for that kind of a knockout. Ultimately didn't, but I told you all Chavez was good. He just couldn't quite sustain the pace, and Van's body work started adding up as we got into the second and third round. But a good fight. And on the first fight of the night, Raul Rosas Jr. defeated Orichi Long via unanimous decision, 29-28. Good first round from Rosas, bad second round. Couldn't get a takedown in the second round. His striking is developing, I'll be charitable. He also, look, man, he's young, both in terms of his life and his career, but he doesn't shift gears. He's got his plan A, and if plan A doesn't work, he just keeps going with plan A. That whole second round, he couldn't get a takedown, and he didn't have anything else to do. There was one exchange when he kind of like tried to make it into a bit of a brawl, and Orichi Long just would not really oblige him. I'm not saying there's no talent in Rosas, but his last couple of fights should have demonstrated pretty clearly where he needs to work. And not an inspiring performance out of him, this fight. And that was the card. I mentioned your fight of the night already. Your performances went to the only two finishes, so Bahamondes and Souza. Rybovic and Zellhuber deserved more than $50K for that fight. That was a barn burner that deserved another zero on the end of that. Minimum. But I'm not in charge of that. So, full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. That is my pick of the... hang on, because I have the transitions between rounds there. Want to make sure... Yeah, I do, in fact, have one of the pictures of that cut on Aldana's forehead there, if you're so inclined. And again, if you're not squeamish, go over there and give that a read. Yeah, that's it for that one. So, okay, let's see what. So, okay, news. There we go. That's where I am. Okay. UFC 309 got some fights announced for. That was kind of what took up most of the announcements. And one we knew was being planned. They made it official. UFC 309, your main event, Madison Square Garden, Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. What a waste of everyone's time. But here we are. It's a waste of everyone's time, and at this point, I want Jon Jones to retire after this fight just to stick it to everybody. Because people have started coming out now. No, we got to see Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, and we got to see Jon Jones and Pereira's on the table, and this is stuff we should have been doing instead of Jon and Stipe. And instead, we've wasted forever on this. Just waste of everyone's time. The co-main event caught some attention. Charles Oliveira will fight Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler apparently trying to moving on from the Conor McGregor fight. I understand that Michael Chandler is not too many people's favorite personality. Fine. You do have to kind of feel bad for the guy getting dicked out of the last prime years of his career. Because that's what happened to him. He was coming off of some losing efforts, but some wonderful fights with I mean, his UFC run to this point is 2-3. Stopped Dan Hooker. Had a real nearly beat Charles Oliveira. I mean, he nearly stopped that guy in the first round. Great fight with Justin Gaethje in 2021. Knocks out Tony Ferguson in 2022 with that front kick. Then has another great fight in 2022 with Dustin Poirier. Loses. But then is like, hey, it's November of 22. We're going to bring you on to coach the Ultimate Fighter opposite Conor, and you're going to fight Conor McGregor, and it'll be a big deal. That was going to be when he finally gets in the cage to fight Oliveira. It will be almost 2 years since his last fight. At his age, the last 2 years of his physical prime. He got screwed out of that by Conor being Conor and Conor in the UFC having a dick measuring contest. Because there's a non-trivial chance, and Conor's kind of been making some noise about this, that he kind of wants out. The UFC is sort of just sitting on his contract, and they really don't want him to sign somewhere else. And I'm not saying Conor hasn't played a role in some of this. Believe me, I'm not. That's not to absolve him of anything. It's throwing it all on Conor, I think, is not accurate. Is mostly what I'm getting at there. So sucks for Michael Chandler to have been screwed around for that long. I don't wish. There's very few people I would wish that on. That's all I'm saying about that. So he and Charles Oliveira are having a rematch. What else do we have on that card? Bo Nickel and Paul Craig. Okay. And Chris Weidman and Eric Anders. That's a borderline waste of people's time. Also announced on that card, but we don't have the bout order for the following: Karine Silva and Viviane Araujo. Okay. Nikita Krylov and Azamat Murzakanov. I actually don't hate that, and I haven't said that about a light heavyweight fight in a long time. Veronica Hardy and Eduarda Mora, Jonathan Martinez and Marcus McGee. That's good. Marcus McGee a little bit underappreciated, and Jonathan Martinez is. He couldn't get it done against It was Jose Aldo that beat him last time, right? Because trying to leg kick Jose Aldo is just a bad idea. I still think pretty highly of Martinez. Martinez and McGee, that's a good one. And then Mickey Gall and Ramiz Brahimaj, whatever. Surprised Gall's still with the promotion, actually. Yeah, I'm a little surprised they're still paying him. But that card will continue to be fleshed out. Yeah, I don't care at all about Jones and Miocic. At all. So consequently, I don't really care about that card right now. There's some good fights on there, but nothing that kind of sparks my interest. I think they announced for November 2nd. Oh, I'm sorry. That's November 16th is 309. So for Chandler, that will be over 2 years since his last fight. I think that was in October. Whatever. November 2nd, I believe they confirmed Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi. Really good fight. As the main event for the Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Edmonton crowds are not great. For a lot of things. In a lot of sports, Edmonton crowds are a little bit iffy. But Moreno and Albazi probably crowns your next challenger after the upcoming flyweight title fight. Co-main event, Aaron Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas. I don't hate that. They're giving Derek Lewis a gimme. Here's the thing to pay attention to about this card. This will be the first one with the new rules in play. Because Edmonton, Alberta. Alberta's already said they're going with those. So this will be the first UFC event with legalized 12-6 elbows and the downed opponent rule being you need a knee or on your seat. You need at least a knee down to be downed. Your hands don't factor into it at all. So new definition of grounded opponent, one that makes a lot more sense to most of us. Although I'd rather they just legalized knees to the head of a downed opponent, but that's just me. And 12 to 6 elbows being legal. Minor note about this, you still can't hit the back of the head, which I know a lot of people only use 12 to 6 elbows when they're hitting the back of the head. Still can't hit the back of the head, but the 12 to 6 elbow being legalized, thumbs up, way overdue. So, minor note on that card. At the moment, that's supposed to be the first one with those new rules actually in effect. Anything else on that card that is interesting? Because I don't care about Derek Lewis. Charles Jourdain trying his hand at bantamweight. Victor Henry's a rough welcome. Pedro Munoz, Naaman Zahabi, nope, that's kind of it. That is not a very interesting. I like the main event. The presumptive co-main of Blanchfield and Namajunas is actually pretty good, and I'm not disinterested in Jourdain and Henry. Eamon Zahabi and Pedro Munoz does not interest me all that much. I think it'll be an okay fight, but I'm not like chomping at the bit for that one. Munoz, I think you're kind of seen his ceiling, and Eamon Zahabi is just wildly weird. For a guy with only 2 losses in the UFC, he feels inconsistent in his performances. I mean, the fact that he got the decision over Javid Basharat by doing a lot of circling doesn't help things. Okay. We already knew about Roy Valentira for October, which is yes, please. I think we got somewhat confirmed. This might have been announced a little bit ago, but an Apex card October 19th. I know I've talked about this, but Anthony Hernandez and Michel Pereira, really good fight. Anything else on that card? Rob Font and Kyler Phillips isn't bad. They're trying to get Robelis to Spain back on the horse, giving him a jobber. Asu Almabayev is, I find, moderately interesting, and Matthews Nicolau. Okay, there's a couple of fights on there that are all right. Yeah, I think that's it for fight announcements. Okay, we've been going for a bit longer than I anticipated, but turns out I had stuff to say about 306. Who knew? Let me check Twitter, see what if anything crazy is broken, apart from, earlier today, someone trying to shoot Trump again. You know, I am not. I try very hard not. Politics occasionally enters the discussion around MMA because it intersects on occasion. But I, unless it's relevant to what's being discussed, I try not to talk politics. So without talking about my political leanings all that much, let me just throw this out there. That's the second time in like 3 months someone has taken a legitimate shot at or very near. I don't think he actually fired shots at Trump this time around, but it's the second time in like 3 months, probably less than that actually, that there's been a legitimate attempt on the life of former President Donald Trump. If something does happen to that man, something nefarious happens to that man between now and November, between now and the election, I'm not even, to be abundantly clear, this is not a declaration of my desire for who wins between him and Harris. I don't like either of them. But I'm not so ignorant to the state of things that the following should just be taken as a statement of reality, not a wish or not a expression of my political leanings. If something nefarious happens to Donald Trump before the election, bad things are going to happen here. And oh boy. Once again, that's not me calling for unrest. That's not me. I'm not out here waving the flag for revolution. I'm far from it. It is an observation that if something nefarious happens, um, and again, I don't actually care all that much if he wins or loses. Um, but man, just I think it's to be fair, there's a decent chance the same is true if something nefarious happens to Kamala Harris. It just feels significantly less likely that it happens to Kamala Harris. Oh boy. How did we get here? Sorry, I don't know. That one just struck me today. That second time in a relatively short window that one of the two people running representing the major political parties here in the United States was non-trivially close to being the result to being politically assassinated. And I don't like unrest, but it shouldn't be surprising to say that if something nefarious, I can't say something bad because something bad that's just random could happen to anybody. But if something nefarious like that actually happens to Trump, I hesitate to speculate even about what the fallout from that would be because it would not be pretty. Be real ugly. Real ugly. All right, sorry, that's my expression of depression and pessimism around that, I suppose. All right, let me check. Let's see what else has happened, and if nothing new, then we'll get out of here. All right, nope, nothing new there, so let's get into plugs. There's no Damn You Hollywood this week. Instead, Monday we will be doing a TV party for Ash vs. Evil Dead, Season 1. There's a long-running gag over on the Radulich Broadcasting Network about that particular show, and we'll get into it. So if you want to hear us talk about a show that debuted, that had a 3-season run starting just about a decade ago, um, tune in. We'll have a good time talking about it. Last week was on Damn You Hollywood was a review of Beetlejuice. Good time was had. So listen to that if you're so inclined as well. All right. There was no UFC event on Saturday, so no preview for this week. Instead, I will. I don't know what I'll do Saturday. WWE SmackDown on Friday, per usual. Actually, last Friday I wound up covering a TNA pay-per-view instead of SmackDown because they couldn't find someone for the TNA event, and my editor could cover SmackDown and do some other things because it was only 2 hours and featured commercial breaks, and the pay-per-view was 3 hours without commercial breaks. Kind of standard. All right. So find those in the MMA or wrestling zones of 411mania.com. And next week we will be here to preview the French card. Moicano versus Saint-Denis. Yeah, September 28th. That's actually not a terrible card. Boy, it's a lot of fights, though. Hang on. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14 fights. Good grief. That's a lot. That's just a lot of fights. All right, full preview next week. You know, in fairness, I mean, one, that's just too many fights. That's at least 3. It's at least 2 too many fights. But full preview next week. So, okay. Tune in for that. It's not a bad card on paper, apart from the number of fights. I'm pretty sure I can already tell you which ones I'd cut, too. Yeah, there's 2 light heavyweight fights we could just dismiss without hesitation. All right. But preview next week. All right. Until then, thank you all very much for listening. I appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.